Good morning. Thank you for being patient for a few minutes. This is a meeting of the Securities and Exchange Commission under the Government in the Sunshine Act. The first matter on our agenda today is the consideration of amendments to the federal proxy rules to facilitate the use of electronic shareholder forums. When we first raised the idea of an electronic shareholder forum at our proxy roundtables in May, many of our panelists, particularly those representing the institutional investor community, were very positive about its prospects as a supplement to the shareholder proposal process. That's because shareholders want cheaper, faster, and better ways to engage each other and the companies that they own. Although the proxy process is, of course, one way of doing this, shareholders often tell us that this can be a time-consuming and expensive process. After all, the proxy season usually comes only once a year, and then the proposal has to comply with often detailed proxy rules and constraints on solicitation. Our panelists noted that recent technological developments could provide a more effective and more efficient means of communication than any that are currently available to shareholders. As Russell Reed of CalPERS put it, using electronic shareholder forums as a supplement might accomplish a lot of good things. A number of facilities that could be called electronic shareholder forums already exist. For example, the Motley Fool and Yahoo sponsor such forums, and shareholders today use them to communicate with each other. What's been missing from all of this, however, has been any meaningful connection to what actually goes on in the company. Despite the potential benefits of electronic shareholder forums, shareholders and companies alike have been reluctant to establish, to maintain, and to operate them, due in part to uncertainty over liability for statements and information provided by those participating in the forum. In addition, there is the very real concern whether views and statements expressed through the forum would be considered proxy solicitations. As a result, in July, we proposed a new exemption from the proxy rules for any solicitation in an electronic shareholder forum so long as it occurs more than 60 days prior to the date of the shareholders' meeting and satisfies the other conditions of the exemption. We proposed the 60-day period to limit the potential for abuse, since companies are permitted to begin their solicitation of proxies for a meeting within 60 days of the meeting date. We also proposed new Rule 14A-17 to provide liability protection for a shareholder, a company, or a third party on behalf of a shareholder or company that establishes or maintains an electronic shareholder forum regarding statements or information provided by a third party participating in the forum. Today, we're adopting these amendments substantially as proposed to give greater currency to electronic shareholder forums by clarifying the responsibilities of those who establish and maintain them. Those amendments will remove both real and perceived impediments to continued private sector experimentation with electronic shareholder forums. By facilitating communications on the Internet among shareholders and between shareholders and the companies that they own, we hope to tap the potential of technology to better vindicate shareholders' rights in ways that are potentially both more effective and less expensive. In this regard, these rule amendments are similar to our e-proxy rules, which will be in effect for the 2008 proxy season. In both situations, we have harnessed the power and potential of technology to empower shareholders to exercise their rights, whether to conduct proxy solicitations online at cheaper cost or to communicate with the company and with each other without fear of liability or the proxy rules, provided that certain conditions are met. 12 years ago, in the early days of the Internet, back when we had not Google and Yahoo, but CompuServe and Prodigy, the New York Supreme Court ruled in a libel case that someone who made a libelous statement about an investment bank on the Internet triggered liability for the service provider. In response, then Representative Wyden, now Senator Wyden, and I wrote a law called the Internet Freedom and Family Empowerment Act, which overturned this decision and enhanced free speech on the Internet by making it unnecessary for Internet service providers and other ISPs to unduly restrict customers' actions for fear of being found legally liable for their conduct. This law established some of the key ground rules for the Internet and helped make our current level of personal interaction and communication on the Internet possible. and this has been the rule of law on the Internet ever since. Today's rule amendments are, in essence, the federal securities regulation equivalent of that landmark piece of Internet legislation. I hope that these amendments, like the Internet Freedom and Family Empowerment Act, will spark the growth of online forums for companies and shareholders and stimulate experimentation and innovation in communications between companies and shareholders. I want to thank the staff of the Division of Corporation Finance for their excellent work on these rule amendments. In particular, I want to thank John White, Brian Behaney, Lily Brown, Betsy Murphy, Tamara Brightwell, and John Fieldsen. I also want to thank the Office of the General Counsel for their excellent work. And I'll now turn it over to John White for his more detailed explanation of the proposal.